Welcome to the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Hello, I am so excited for today's conversation with Luisa Alberto, the CEO of People First Finance, a women-led financial services agency that provides bookkeeping, tax planning, and financial strategy services to women business owners. I am a fan of Luisa for so many reasons. On this episode, we talked about her path to founding People First Finance, how she found burnout creeping in earlier this year and what she did about it, what she wishes more entrepreneurs and business owners knew about the M word, money, mindset, and the role it plays in our business finances, how to figure out profitability, and yes, it does require some math, the harmful financial advice she sees on the internet, and the question you should ask to make the right decisions for you, her definition of leadership today, and so much more. Luisa has 20 years of finance and operations experience working alongside visionary leaders of successful Bay Area startups such as Blue Bottle Coffee, and she earned her first entrepreneurial stripes as a brick and mortar juice bar owner. Her mission is to ease the financial burden and overwhelm that holds too many ambitious business owners back from reaching our fullest potential and making a successful living as the brilliant creators they were born to be. Without further ado, here we go. Hello, and welcome to another new episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. I am seriously so excited to have you here today, Luisa.
I am equally as excited to be here.
Oh my goodness. I already know we're going to have so much fun. Before we jump in, would you mind just briefly introducing yourself and saying hello to our listeners?
Of course. Hello, listeners. This is such a pleasure. My name is Luisa Alberto, and I am the founder and CEO of People First Finance. And we are a financial services agency for mostly women agency owners and service providers who are wanting to scale and looking for higher touch support when it comes to managing their finances. So we offer bookkeeping, accounting, tax, and advising services. So everything you would need to be able to scale your agency or service-based business. And just really excited to be here. I love what I do, and I'm really excited to talk more about it.
Yay! Oh my goodness. Well, in that vein, would love to hear a little bit more about what you, Luisa, are currently up to these days, both on a personal level and on a professional level, like what your day-to-day looks like.
Ooh, fun. Let's see. I'm doing a lot of active listening right now. This may sound kind of weird. I don't know. It's like I'm really trying to stay in tune with what people want, what's important to them. And this is both in the business and in my personal world. It's like for the business side, I feel like a lot of us have really felt a shift in the market. Sales cycles are a little bit longer. There's been a lot of ebb and flow. It's an election year. There's just a lot going on. And so I really am trying to stay very close to what my customers actually want, what they actually need, what's actually going to move the needle for them in their business. So that's been really fun because I am very naturally curious and inquisitive and just love listening. So that's been really awesome. And then on the personal side, just really trying to enjoy life, really trying to enjoy the holiday season, really trying to enjoy this new shift that we're going to make from this year into the next and what that means and what that looks like. It's always such an exciting time to think about like, ooh, what's 2025 going to have in store? And really being the architect of what that looks like always feels so great for us as entrepreneurs. So
Oh, that's so fun. So here for all the listening. And also, I feel like every year I'm like, oh, the calendar year is just a construct on the one hand. And on the other hand, I do feel like it can be such a powerful portal for reflection, self reflection, taking stock, thinking about what we want next year, especially like when we're able to really carve out the time to be intentional about it. So that's fun to think that we're catching you in the like dreaming, visioning, planning stages for next year.
Oh, yes. And so much of that has come. Oh my gosh, it has been such a wild ride over the last year. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into some aspects of that, but just this entrepreneurial journey is filled with twists and turns, and scaling an agency is not easy. And I've learned so many hard lessons over the last year, but I'm a fast learner. So I learn, I pivot. I'm able to really just be real with myself about what's possible, what feels good, and what doesn't. But gosh, it's like hard lessons learned every day, I feel like.
I can so relate to that. Um, I definitely want to talk about some of those. And I also really want to talk about your journey. And so, would actually love to invite you, maybe before we get into the twists and turns and ups and downs of the past year, which I definitely want to talk about, for you to give us a little bit more context on how you came to be where you are today. I know our listeners really appreciate hearing like what journey brought you to this moment where we are right now.
Yes. So I do not have a traditional accounting background. A lot of people are shocked by this, but I am not a traditional accountant. So I didn't work at some big firm and take exams and do all of that stuff. I went down that road for a little bit just because really my journey into the world of finance and mastering personal and business finances was born on the heels of my first business that I had. I had a brick and mortar retail location in San Francisco. I was a young mother. And so trying to make ends meet, running a new business and being in debt. I mean, I had college loan debt, credit card debt, all the things from my wild and rockin' 20s, where I was like, whatever. It's like, I'll just die with debt. I'll just make monthly payments and live the life I want. It's totally fine. And some big life changes, like having my daughter, really put things in a different perspective. And so I launched myself into this journey of really learning how to master my personal finances. And that's really how a lot of this started. And so the way I learn is I just immerse myself in people's like thought leaders and in books, and just to get a well-rounded understanding of and frameworks for whatever skill I'm trying to learn. I think a lot of us do this. Like I learn in lots of different ways, audiobooks, visuals, courses, actually applying what I'm learning. And so personal finance was that for me. And I started very early on listening to Dave Ramsey, like so many people do. And I have my own thoughts and feelings about that human now, knowing what I know. But you can't argue with his very easy framework. It's like 4 steps to financial freedom, which sounds so cheesy, but it really helped give me a place to start. And so I just immersed myself in the world of finance, found I had a real knack for it, went into business, learned a lot of really hard, like business lessons the hard way, had my daughter, was working 3 jobs. And then my first business actually ended in bankruptcy, which now looking back was such a blessing that I was able to use bankruptcy as a tool, or think about it as a tool and not think about it as this like stigma, which gave me a lot of confidence. And I was like, oh, I get this. Like, I get how this money thing works. And so I really started to apply what I was learning to business. And then I got very organically local. I'm in the Bay Area, of course, and I was approached by a lot of small business owners and folks here who were like, how did you master finance, Louisa? What do you know about finance? How did you start this business and get the financing for it? And how are you managing cash? So did very sort of organic coaching and consulting one to one. I'd go to people's living rooms, I'd go to their offices and just help them manage their money better. And I loved it. So on the heels of the pandemic, I was like, I bet I could reach more people if I did this thing online. Like I wouldn't have to travel everywhere. I'd be able to work with people all across the country. And so I just had a hunch that I should bring this all online. And then the pandemic hit. And then it was like, well, thank goodness I had the wherewithal to think about bringing this online and learning a whole new business, right? Because the rules of online business are also so different from the rules of like retail, from the rules of and marketing and all of that, from being a one-to-one service provider. And so, yeah, it was a lot. But I was really fueled by this idea that so many of us are held back by just a lack of knowledge in financial literacy. The words, the concepts, the way money works, we're just never taught this. And we hear this all the time, right? We're never taught this, but we're never taught this. So to expect that people can go out and follow their passions and start businesses and all of a sudden just be raking in the dough and everything's fine is just ludicrous. It's like there's always going to be a knowledge gap if you haven't prioritized learning about money. And so many of us don't for so many reasons. But I really threw my whole self into it. And so was able to leverage that and do some coaching online. And then I built a membership for a while. And then I was like, you know what? I think I can build this agency model, reach more people, hire a really qualified team to help me do this the right way. And People First Finance was born. So that's kind of I don't know if that was long or short, but that was my journey.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Like, I have so many questions. It definitely does not feel too long or too short. I'm curious, when did you officially open the doors to People First Finance? And how has it been going since you formalized that umbrella for your work?
So I launched the agency officially in September of 2021. It'll be 3 years. And it's so funny. I opened my doors and I was like, okay, we're at a scale now. I'm just in that mentality of like growth and getting bigger and reaching more people. And I have been since day one, but I had no idea what I was doing because the skills of building a business and building an agency that works really well, like a well oiled machine, is a feat in and of itself, right? Let alone managing people and managing cash and sales and marketing and all of the things that we have to do, all the hats we have to wear. So it's been going really well because I think I approach it from a place of like, what new thing do I need to learn? What new thing can I add to my repertoire, to my tool belt that will help me be a more effective leader, that will help me delegate better, that will help me find right fit clients, that will help me serve them better? It's just this constant like education I'm searching for and questions that I'm asking to get those bigger questions answered. And I think it makes me a better business owner and just makes the services that we provide better and better over time. So that's really exciting.
I've totally had my own sips of the like scale immediately Kool-Aid. And of course, it's like we don't know what we don't know, and we totally change our business model and then get to rebuild from the ground up. You alluded to the fact that this year in particular has been a wild ride. I'd love to hear a little bit more. I know we're talking like mid-November 2024. This episode will come out next month. Like, what has 2024 in particular held for you?
Ooh, so in 2023, we experienced rapid growth. So I'm great at sales. I love sales. I love people. I can do that part. Well, I did that part really well. And then we had all of these people and their expectations. And I hadn't yet really taken the time to clarify everything that I need to clarify for clients and for our team members. And so, again, the inner workings of an agency, when you have multiple services that you're providing, multiple people, you've really got to be great at communication and the infrastructure that you have to make sure everybody's on the same page, rowing the boat in the same direction, basically, right? And that's what sets most successful, I feel like, agencies apart from others is that ability to make things feel seamless, to make the experience really seamless for the client. It's a heavy lift. And so while we were taking on all these clients, I really didn't have the capacity or the skill, quite frankly, to make the internal workings work like a well oiled machine. And so over the past 6 months, I was searching. We get into these modes where we're searching for a solution and we're throwing money at problems and we're trying to figure it out and things don't quite feel right. And a lot of the like late 2023, early 2024 was that feeling of like, I'm searching for something and I just don't know what it is. I can't find it. Nothing's the right thing, but I'm spending all this money. I now know that I was experiencing burnout. I now know what to call that. That was burnout. At the time, I just thought, well, this is how you scale a business and it's hard and I have to do all these things. And now I know it was burnout. And so I was making decisions from this place of being completely depleted, feeling a little bit defeated. I'd gotten all these great clients in, and we just didn't have the communication to be able to exceed their expectations. We were still delivering the work, right? Things were still happening and they were getting value, but my standards are very high. I want to exceed expectations. I want you to feel we're the best thing in the world. We're essential to your success. So we had a little bit of attrition, and I had a big team, a bigger team, and that's always a little bit more challenging to manage more people. And so just went through a lot, like the seeking period, and then finally found a solution. Thank goodness that worked for me. I learned how to find the right coach with the right program and the right framework that helped me cut through a lot of the noise and really get back on my feet. And so the last 3 to 6 months have been just that. And it's felt so good. There's more peace and more space, more clarity. And yeah, that's what I was looking for. So it was a journey, but we've landed in a good spot for now. Could change at any moment, but we're good for now.
Oh my gosh, I love hearing that. I mean, I hate that you were in a moment of burnout and that it like brought about the changes that have brought you to a good place. I'm curious, we talk about burnout a lot on this podcast. As someone, I flirt with burnout myself more often than I would care to have be true or that I like to admit. What helped you recognize? I hear even in your description of like, I know for me, it's like when I get into this like pathological doing mode where I'm just like so focused on the to-do list that like that's usually a sign that like all is not well. How did you recognize the symptoms of burnout in yourself? And like what did you do to recalibrate from that before like rebuilding from this new place?
That's such a good question. So basically, I was trying to disengage from my business, which meant I brought in consultants, I brought another person to manage my team. I was basically trying to create a buffer between me and my business. So if you ever feel like you're searching for solutions and trying to outsource and hire and looking for like externally that way to solve your problems, that could be a sign of burnout. I did not know that. And so what I was able to do was sort of stop and take stock of where I was and make some really hard decisions, which required me to re engage. So it was sort of like a one foot in front of the other thing. And that's why this program was so great, because it was like, okay, this is the next part of the program is you've got to reset roles on your team so that the pay and like the activities that those team members are doing make sense for your business. So a lot of people pleasing that I had to unwind and work through, right? Because I love people and I want everybody to feel taken care of and be happy. But I realized that I was really doing a disservice to my business and my team and my clients operating from that place. And so had to have some really hard conversations with team members and reduce pay and reset roles and really focus on systems that we have so that we're not relying on people. I have strong systems inside my business that anybody can come in and take charge of, and so that I don't feel like I'm held hostage by people on my team or that I have to jump in every second to fix something. It's like, nope, this is the way we've decided it's going to go. If it didn't go that way, I want to know why. And we moved from this neutral place. So that was the biggest kind of shift for me, was to move from an anxious place to a neutral place where I wasn't harping on every single way that people were doing all the things. It was like, what are the facts for client complaints or anything that would take you off the charts of like somebody feeling like they weren't getting what they were paying for? It was like, what are the facts? Because people are going to feel how people are going to feel, but you've got to really be strong and grounded in the way that you have built your infrastructure. And I had to learn the skill of delegation to really get my team working for me instead of me feeling like I was beholden to my team. I think a lot of us get in that trap when you start to hire. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to make sure this person is okay. When really you've hired them to do specific things that should bring you a return. And if they're not doing those specific things in a way that brings a return, something needs to shift. So, really, just like turning on my neutral business brain to make some better, more profitable decisions.
Oof, I can only imagine the inner work that comes with turning on that neutral business brain. I'm curious, was there anything that you did from either a mindset or a nervous system regulation perspective that was especially helpful there?
I think I was so afraid to make the hard decisions that once I worked through the fear of that and approached them and practiced, just tried approaching it from a neutral place and got the result that I was desperately seeking, there was like momentum that built from that, right? This relief and this like, oh, it's going to be okay. And you can do this. And they're not going to hate you, right? You're just getting clarity. No one thinks you're a terrible person. Nobody's going to, right? And so there was a lot of self coaching and mindset work around that, that I need to protect my business and I need to protect myself. I always preach against this and I've been so diligent about paying myself. And for 3 months, I didn't pay myself. And I was like, Louisa, you're paying this person on your team, but you're not paying yourself. Like, and you're the, anyway, it was just wild. And so going in and resetting that and reprioritizing myself as the heart and the engine of the business that needs the fuel to keep going was huge. And like I say, there was just momentum that came from doing business a little bit differently and getting a different result that was truly, truly what I needed to feel stable and feel sane and a little bit disconnected, but also engaged and participating and making sure that our team was able to have everything that they needed. But yeah, just a little bit of separation. It was a lot. It was a lot.
I can only imagine. And I so appreciate you sharing that. I also know like what a journey it can be on an ongoing basis to like really put ourselves as founders in the equation when we look at the business that we're building and how it sustains us. So, really interesting to hear how you found the right balance of like neutrality in some aspects of your business, but also re engaging in perhaps the pieces that you had found yourself pulling back for. And just also to say, I hear you. And I feel like I've had more uncomfortable conversations this year in my business than I've like ever had in my life. And they're never as bad as I think they're going to be ever. And I also almost always, I think, feel better after having the conversation than I felt trying to like think about having the conversation for months and months on end. I'll never forget this quote. I forget where it comes from, but someone said like the quality of your life will improve in direct association with the number of uncomfortable conversations that you're willing to have. And I was like, I really don't want that to be true, but it really has turned out to be true.
It's so true. And also for me too, because it's balancing like in your business just came to me, but like in your business, you need to ask for help. Like if you're planning to grow, if you want to, work with a higher volume of clients or what have you, right? And replicate yourself or scale, you really need to get good at asking for help and delegating and being very direct. But I feel like also like with my partner, all I needed to do was like, it's so hard to ask for help in my personal life. So I just feel like there's a skill that I was missing in how to ask for help in a way that felt affirming to me, that was going to help me achieve my goals without the fear that I'm putting somebody out. Like, I feel like that creeps in from my personal life and it crept into the business. And since I've made that adjustment on the business side, I've also been able to make it on the personal side, where with people who are really important to me, I'm much more proactive, much more direct. Even with like my parents, like I can just be more direct because it feels so good to just say the thing, to not keep this elephant in the room, to just say the thing. But I do feel like that's a skill. It's something that we just don't, I don't know if it's a generational thing or a gender thing or just an individual, whoever you are thing, but if you've struggled with that, you are not alone.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually talk about this all the time because I feel like one of the number one things that I've observed inside the Girls Club Collective community is so many of our members, and I would put myself in this category, were people who are naturally, our default mode is generous, but we are so uncomfortable asking for help and building the muscle to ask for help. It's a real muscle, and people want to help us, but they can't read our minds. And so, how do we genuinely get better at just saying what we need and also making, I think, to what you were saying earlier, like making that neutral in the sense that, like, if people can help us, they often will. And if they can't, that's okay too, but at least we asked.
It's so true. And it's so funny, when you learn these lessons and you're like, it's so simple. Like, it's so simple. It's so obvious, but you feel things differently and you feel lessons differently at different times in this journey. I'm realizing where it's like, I could know that I need to take consistent action and I need to market consistently. And I could hear that over and over and over and over again. But then one day it just hits different. And you're like, oh crap. Like, that's why I don't have a stacked pipeline because I haven't been consistent. I knew that. Wait, I knew that. So I just feel like there's this cumulative experience in entrepreneurship where different lessons just come in. And I don't know, there's always something to learn. And there's something so wonderful about that. And I feel like a lot of us get so much personal growth, satisfaction out of this journey that keeps us going, even when it's really hard. And then some seasons you learn all the lessons, they come and smack you over the head really hard and get you down. And you have this ability or opportunity to rise from that even stronger and evolve. And gosh, it's just really, really cool, but really, really hard. But it's just it's really cool. Yeah.
Totally. I think like the number one thing that I find in entrepreneurship, which I feel like I talk about all the time, is like wherever you go, there you are. And there's so many places to hide, I think, in other jobs where we can where culture is a factor and our manager is a factor and all these things that are like maybe beyond our control in that moment are factors. And then when we're running our businesses, it's like, oh no, it's me. I'm the problem. Like, here I am again.
It's so true. We can't escape ourselves. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot too. It's like when we're in this mode of, oh, I should outsource branding or I should outsource this, where is it something that you could do or learn that you're avoiding? There's like this avoidance thing that we do when something feels hard or we feel like we don't have time. Like, I remember where I was talking with somebody about like outreach, right, to prospective clients and automating that. And I'm like, of all the automations, like, isn't it really important that initial conversation and relationship building that you have with potential clients? I mean, yeah, at a certain point, when you're mega, maybe you need robotic AI lead gen, but I don't know, especially in service businesses like B2B businesses, I feel like that's a really important thing for the founder to do is to establish relationships, strong relationships. And so whenever I hear people, or I even wanted to outsource that, and it was like, wait a minute, but that's me disengaging because really that's an important part of the business. Nobody else will do it the way that I do it. So what are the parts of my business where really I can do it best? And a lot of that is messaging, positioning. And these are things we always want to outsource. Like, oh, can somebody else just do my marketing? And it's like, but you're the one who can speak best about your business and most eloquently about like the why behind what you do and how you do it. And anyway, so I've been thinking a lot about that as I think about where to put my time and focus going forward.
I am interrupting this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast really quickly to personally invite you to join the Girls Club Collective. The Girls Club Collective is an intentionally intimate feminine leadership lab for change agents and the personal and professional development community that you've been looking for. Don't just take my word for it, though. While you're submitting your application on our website, girlsclubcollective.co, please be sure to read one of the countless testimonials from our incredible members and alumni. There are so many benefits to being a part of the collective, which is designed around our signature feminine leadership framework. That means you'll have opportunities every month for connection, embodied strategy, visibility, and amplification, and so much more. Don't forget to mention our podcast in the Where Did You Hear About the Cohort section on your application. And now, without further ado, back to the episode. I feel like we'd be remiss not to talk a little bit more about the M word, money as we talk today, which I know is like, I feel like it's everywhere, right? It's an undercurrent in so much of what we've already talked about so far. But I love your perspective on this and just how real and honest you are about the things that we don't know because no one taught us, and also the things that we need to know to be able to thrive and have like the relationship with money and the resourcing and the abundance and generosity and all the things available to us that I know so many of us have as part of our vision of entrepreneurship. And so I'm curious, what are one or a few things that you wish that more business owners and entrepreneurs knew when it comes to money in our businesses, in our lives, in our personal lives? Like, what should more of us know about money?
I mean, I definitely think this falls under the same umbrella of no one will care about your money more than you. So, outsourcing to a bookkeeper who's checking boxes or talking to an accountant once a year and not looking at your bank statements or not really keeping close tabs on money coming in and out or what your tax liability should be or how much you should have saved. I think that no one will do that for you. And it can be very, very simple, but just keeping eyes on your money and asking questions. So if you do work with a bookkeeper, not just, okay, I have a bookkeeper and calling it a day, but really taking a look at your books every month and asking questions. Why is this way? Oh, I had this big expense or I got a new car. How, like, I think it's a business expense. How should that be reflected in my finances, right? Really, this is again the engagement piece, right? This is a really important part. We want to disassociate. We want to avoid this. We want to outsource this. We want somebody else to do it. But this is an area of the business where I really feel like, much like relationship building, you need to be very involved and engaged in where your money is going. And so I've talked with a lot of founders, especially early stage, where they're like, I'm just trying to survive, I'm just trying to get sales. But if you don't have a really solid understanding of profit, $500,000 business could be in the negative, right? Because your expenses are so high. So just really understanding some of those basic concepts, asking a lot of questions, really challenging yourself to engage. Now there are more resources than ever available to us. You can Google something, you can use ChatGPT to get an answer. Like, I'm not saying that you should use those things for specific financial advice. Really, you should consult a licensed professional, but even just to get familiar with terminology, learn some basics. You could even ask ChatGPT, I'm a small business owner. I run this, da da da. Write me a checklist for how to review my finances like we have so many resources at this point. I'm like, there's no excuse. But sometimes it's really hard to know where to start. And so I think we need to start by very simply just taking a look at money coming in and money going out every month. What's coming in, what's going out. And just getting used to that and identifying places where you're like, oof, I'm paying a lot in this thing. That doesn't feel very good. Maybe I should drop that. So I really think that's important. It doesn't have to be, I mean, I know for some people it can be overwhelming, but knowing is much better than avoiding, I feel like, at the end of the day, because it'll come back to you at some point and you don't want it to come back to you like a 30-foot wave. You want it to come back to you like a nice little ripple that you can handle, right?
Yeah, well, and I'm curious when you think about, you mentioned even just getting a handle on profitability, which I know can be overwhelming if you haven't built that relationship with the numbers in your business. I know 2023 for me was like a huge year for like building a relationship with the numbers of my business. And I definitely still have a lot of work to do in terms of like really understanding the margins on the different things that I do. But I found getting that stuff down on paper so unbelievably helpful for not just like wondering where all the money was going. Where would you suggest someone get started in like understanding profitability on like their different offers or the different things that they do in their business?
Yeah, I mean, good old spreadsheets, good old fashioned spreadsheets, right? Is a fine place to start. And your numbers don't have to be perfect, but you want to get a sense, right? So, what a lot of people do is they'll write out what they're charging for an offer and they'll multiply it by the number of clients they need to hit a certain goal. And then they'll hit a revenue mark, right? But taking it one step further to really get a solid understanding of profitability, you've got to build in two types of expenses. One is your cost of delivery, So that could be you if you're the only one delivering the services that you're selling, or it could be you and a contractor who maybe does a portion of the service that you're selling. But your cost of delivery is a variable that changes depending on whether you sell more or you sell less. So you need to know what that expense is. And then your second expense category is operating expenses. So what do you have to pay for regardless of whether you're selling a lot or a little, right? So if you have an office, you're paying office rent regardless of whether you have one client or 50 clients. Insurance, bookkeeping, those kinds of things are just overhead, right? So you've got to factor that in as well. And so once you take your revenue, you factor in those expenses, you'll see what's left. And ideally, in a service based business, a small scale service based business that's pretty simple and running on a lean team, you can hit that 50% profit threshold. And if you can hit that 50% profit threshold, that means that you get to pay 25 to 30% in tax, but then you keep the rest. So you would keep 70% or so of what falls down to the bottom line to reinvest in the business, pay down debt, that sort of thing, right? So having just a very simple rubric, a very simple, just to get a sense, right? Because if you run those numbers and you're like, oh my gosh, I charge this much and it actually costs me X amount, and factor it yourself in. You and taxes are likely to be the biggest expenses you have, especially early on if you are working solo or with one to few subcontractors. You've got to factor yourself in there. But that's a really simple framework you can use just to get like a gut check. And if you're working with a bookkeeper or you use QuickBooks or Wave or one of these accounting softwares and you pull a profit and loss report, you'll see all of those numbers automatically in those reports and can see what net profit looks like for you. But again, factoring in owner pay is really important because if you pay yourself distributions, that won't show up on your profit and loss statement. It'll show up on the balance sheet. So things start to get a little, visibility starts to get a little funny. And so that's why it's great to work with somebody, a bookkeeper or somebody who can help explain how you can look at the numbers so that you are getting accurate data to answer your questions like, is this one service that I'm offering or planning to offer profitable? Because you can sell 20 of something, and if it's not profitable, you're just spinning your wheels, and that's what leads to burnout too.
I think so often when we think about profitability, like I've certainly done this. I know people who have done this where it's like we have the revenue projection, we have the number of things we need to sell, we have the overhead math, but we haven't factored in the cost of delivery to include our time. And so maybe you're coming out with like a positive, quote unquote, profit, but like the profit relative to like what you should be paying yourself to deliver is not, like, those are two different things. So, because if you had to hire someone who's not you to do the thing that only you can do, it would be very expensive in many cases.
That's exactly right. And so I totally get that that can feel overwhelming if you're like Excel, ugh, or numbers, ugh, like I totally get it. But that is a very simple way. And it really does help you make more strategic decisions about your business. It's actually one of the components we added to our new bookkeeping offer because I was like, we have all the data. All I need to do is like give it to you. And so I really think more bookkeepers, like we need to raise the standard of bookkeeping here and really help small business owners, especially when we can get a solid understanding of what insights they can take away from the numbers that we're tracking. And I don't think there's a lot of that. There isn't really a standard in the industry for that. That's something that I'm hoping to change. But just one little insight like that can really change the strategy you take, right? With what offer you're leading with. Maybe you minimize your offers because you're like, actually, this one's really profitable. If we triple down on this, we'll hit our goal so much faster. So it really does help you do more with less, help you be more strategic and move bigger stones, which I think gets you out of survival mode, really, and feast and famine.
I'm curious, in that vein, I feel like there's so much harmful advice out there about money and about how to manage money in your business. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this. I'm curious, like, is there any like conventional wisdom on money that you just like really wish we could unhear, or anything that you're seeing other, not to necessarily like throw shade at anyone in particular, but anything that you're seeing other providers or other like so-called experts in this space really talk about that you're like, oh gosh, that's really, I wish more people knew that like there's a whole lot more context that goes with that advice, or that like that advice is really not the most helpful thing for a lot of people who are my people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the conversations that comes up a lot is the type of entity to select. And so a lot of people are like wondering, they hear about the S Corp and they're wondering, should I transition to an S Corp? And there isn't like a perfect moment in time. There are lots of different factors to consider. And yes, it can save you in taxes, but one of the key components of electing to be taxed as an S Corp is that you pay yourself an owner's salary, a reasonable salary. So you're putting yourself on payroll, you're paying payroll taxes, and it can be costly. So if you don't have predictable revenue, that can be really harmful to you as a business owner. So maybe there's a year where you made a lot of money and have a lot of profit. And so an S corp made sense. But then the next year, your revenue is cut in half and you don't have any profit to show. It's not going to be as advantageous necessarily. So there's a lot of that happening, I think, where then you're depending on an accountant or somebody outside of you to tell you when and what and how. But you've really got to understand these things a little bit more deeply. Like, challenge yourself to just go one step deeper and ask questions until you truly understand and know that it's right for you. I mean, one question you can ask will just say, if anybody's considering LLC versus S Corp and you're talking to your accountant, a really pointed question you can ask them is, how much will this cost me? And I don't know that people think to ask this, but if somebody's like, oh yeah, it looks like this and you should elect S Corp status or you should do this or that, what will it cost me? How do I think about this as a cost? How do I think about this long term? How will this impact my financials next year or 3 years from now? What's required of me, right? So we've got to ask these questions and not just take advice for face value, because there are oftentimes these nuances. And so you've got to work with somebody who you feel like you can have a dialogue with, who you can have a relationship with, who, when you ask that question, they're not going to look at you sideways or disregard you or give you an answer that you don't truly understand and don't feel comfortable prodding, right? That's really important. And so I would say that's a biggie. A lot of tax stuff, different tax advice and looking for tax loopholes and that sort of thing, where if you're on the smaller side in your business, like, don't worry about those things. Your tax deductible expenses are ordinary and necessary for your business. It's not any deeper than that. If you want more strategy than that because you're throwing off a ton of cash and have a ton of profit, that's a whole other problem. Yes, invest in a tax strategist. But if you're not there, it really can be very, very simple that way. Those are the two things that come to mind.
So appreciate those. And I think the other thing that we would really be remiss not to talk about is the other M word when it comes to money, which is mindset. Obviously, there's so much that we can do as individuals from an information perspective, from a building a relationship with the numbers perspective, from a financial literacy perspective. And I think a lot of those things can have a really positive impact on our mindset as it relates to money. But there's also, I know I have found that like some of the best time and financial investments I've made in myself since starting my entrepreneurial journey have been in really working on my mindset as it relates to money, because so often like the numbers are our reality, but our mindset, I find, like almost completely dictates how we feel about our reality, whatever the numbers are. So I would love to hear your thoughts on money mindset in particular, and like how we can build a different relationship with it, or like how it can be supportive for us as we go about pursuing and achieving our business goals and dreams.
Yeah, I think a biggie is connecting what you're spending money on to the outcome that you most desire. So I talk a lot about setting meaningful goals, right? So you sit down as an entrepreneur who's self employed. The wonderful thing is that you can sit down and say, I want to make this much money. There's nobody telling you how much you can make. You get to decide. For some people, that's terrifying. For other people, that's exhilarating. For a lot of people, it's both, right? So I think getting to a place where you can dream and feel bigness in your numbers, in yourself, which requires sort of dropping a lot of the beliefs that we have and sort of taking a second and stepping back from all of that, because none of that defines us. We get to define what meaningful revenue goals look like, how much we want to take home, how the way we spend money gets us closer to that, how we spend money gets us farther from that. So that's a really great thing to do, is do an audit and look at the year, look at where you are, look at your revenue, look at your profit, how much you took home, and look at what you did over the year. Look at how you spent your money. Did you spend it on things? Are you happy where you are? And are you happy with the way that you spent money? Or are there a few things that stick out where you're like, damn, that was a really good decision? Find those things. That was a really good decision. And think, how did I know? Or like, why was it a good decision? How can I repeat that? Right? Focus on what you did right, what you're doing right and well, how you're managing your money well, how you're showing up for yourself well, like staying in that place and staying in that energy and finding it whenever you can and connecting it to this feeling of abundance, to this feeling of I can have what I want and it's all on its way, and all the wonderful, abundant manifesting thoughts that we can have. But to really truly feel those things and find evidence of those things in how you live your life, I think is just so important. And we don't do it enough. I mean, I certainly don't do it. I certainly don't do that kind of reflection. Maybe now I'll take my own advice and I'll do that for 2024 because that sounds awesome. But I think that's a good place to start. Start with the good.
Yes, I am such an advocate for starting with the good. And even hearing you say that too, I'm like, yes, that's one of my favorite parts of looking back at the year and looking ahead is like, what really worked? Like, let's take the time and talk about what really worked. Cause I think it's like so human of us to focus on the things that didn't work first. But we can learn just as much, if not more, about the things that did work. And it puts us in, as you said, that expansive state of feeling like anything is possible when we remind ourselves of all the things that very much did work or are working.
Even just saying that, I feel a sense of relief. I'm like, that exercise will be amazing going into a new year. And I think like we all just need to give ourselves some grace with this, because if you aren't a finance expert and if you didn't grow up with access to financial literacy and it's just not been something that's top of mind or interested to you, that's fine. But it's a part of all of our lives. So at some point, you've got to be able to like reconcile with that, and it doesn't have to feel scary and it doesn't have to feel hard. Find people who can support you in that journey.
Yes, because it's so much more fun to do with other people than to sit down and try to do it by ourselves. Well, one of the big themes that we've been talking about on the podcast this season that I'm so excited to get your take on is leadership and what leadership means in this moment and just to us as individuals. And so I'm curious, when I say the word leadership, what comes up for you right now? Like, how are you thinking about leadership today?
This is such a good question. I really think that a big part of leadership is ownership and integrity. Anything that goes wrong in my business or wrong with a team member, or I take ownership for, and I look at and I think, what can I learn from this? And how can it help make me stronger, make my business stronger? And really being the one to take initiative with that initiative, whether that's writing a whole document out with getting all of the thoughts out of my head and making it really clear so that someone else can take it over, or being very decisive and very articulate so that I'm setting expectations in a really clear way, understanding when those expectations haven't been met. And instead of blaming an outside circumstance, going back to myself and thinking, where could I have been clearer? Where is the gunk in these gears? And where's my part in ungunking them? And I think, we want to blame a lot of other things and have a lot of emotions, and that is a-okay. And at the end of the day, you are the one determining these outcomes, like how your life goes, what comes to you, how happy you are. Like, I really do believe we have a lot more power and control over that than sometimes it feels like we do.
Yes. And I so love the connection between both integrity, which is something that's so important to me, and ownership, because hearing the way that you spoke about those two concepts together is like, oh my gosh, yes, both. Why not both?
Both. Yes.
Well, I could talk to you all day. I'm so excited that you'll be coming to guest teach inside the GCC Entrepreneurs and Magic Mind in a few weeks. It's going to be so much fun. I guess the last thing I'll ask you before I'll ask how people can find you, follow you, keep in touch with you, work with you, all the things is there anything that you're the most excited to share with entrepreneurs in the Magic Mind in a few weeks that you feel inclined to share with us here on the podcast as a preview?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been doing a lot of demystifying. Like, people are getting stuck in these really small questions. So I'm really excited to help people think bigger. I think that's something I'm feeling, this era of expansion where we need to get bigger, right? We need to get bigger. We need to be more visible. We need to take more risk. We need to have more fun. So how can we get out of these little tiny boxes we're in, even take numbers off the page and really just think about ways that we can expand and what that means? Yes, financially, but also from a place of us being in control of our own destinies. Like, how do we get numbers to support that fact? I'm really excited to talk more about that.
Ooh, yes. I feel like I'm calling it now, like that 2025 is going to be a very expansive year. I love that energy and that intention. Well, again, Luisa, I have learned so much from you just from following along with you, and you're so wise and you share so much brilliance so generously with the world. So I'm curious for people who are listening who want to know more about you, who want to know more about People First Finance, who want your wisdom in their pockets, like where are the best places for them to keep in touch with you and get all the updates on all the things?
Yeah, so I have an email newsletter called Savvy Scaling Beyond 500K. It's everything your accountant never told you. So get in on there. I do send emails out pretty regularly, and I try to make them as value packed and relevant as possible. So definitely check that out. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Love connecting with new people. Do not be shy to reach out to me there, Luisa Alberto. And then on Instagram as well, very active there with inspirational posts, and all of our services are there as well. And that handles at People First Finance.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. And I will also mention for anyone listening who's like, 500K, I'm not there yet. I would love to be there. I know you just recently launched a new offering to support people who are on their way there, but not there yet. So would love to also open the floor if you want to give a little plug for what that is for people who may be, again, on their way, but not quite there yet, past the 500,000 mark.
This I am so excited about, so excited to work with founders who are at a bit of an earlier stage. So basically, it's People First Bookkeeping is the offer. It's just bookkeeping, but it's not just bookkeeping. Again, we're sort of going in and leveraging insights, giving you access to experts, helping to increase your financial literacy. So it borders on bookkeeping and a program almost. But the idea is that it's really high touch. So if you feel like you're not getting as much as you want from your current bookkeeper, or you've been doing your books yourself, this is a really great entry point to be able to get some more clarity, get a partner in there with you, making sure that everything's being handled properly in case you have questions, have tax ready books, all that jazz. So definitely check that out. The little button on my website, peoplefirstfinance.com, is called Better Bookkeeping. And that has all the juicy details.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. Definitely putting a pin in a future conversation about how your offerings have evolved over time. I feel like there's so much we could talk about, but we'll leave it here for now. Thank you so much, Luisa. I really appreciate it. And I'm so excited to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Oh my gosh, for me too. The best. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you're currently listening to it, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram at liz.best, that's lis.best, and you can find Girls Club Collective at girls_club_collective. You can also find us on LinkedIn by searching for Liz Best, that's my name, LASBEST, and Girls Club Collective. Join our mail list by visiting the Girls Club Collective homepage and scrolling down to the bottom. You'll be in the loop on upcoming events, retreats, and opportunities to make magic with us, and you'll also receive a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch.